Okay, I am going to get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for investing your time to join our webinar discussion today titled Architects Design Upgrades, Contractors Build Upgrades, and Energy Engineers Pay for Upgrades. My name is Ashley Hines Lynch, and I am your moderator for the webinar. And today's hosts are energy industry experts from ECG, CEO Kendra McQuilton, and Vice President of Engineering Dave Newman. We encourage you to make this an interactive presentation today by using the question answer function at any time. I will be monitoring the private and public chat for your questions and comments. The responses will either be typed back to you or we will answer it aloud as we go. And at the end, you will have the option to raise your hand in the chat function and we can let you speak live to the presenters and myself. Again, this webinar is for you, so please feel free to use any of these functions to interact with us and participate. And thank you again for attending. And I will now pass it over to our presenter, Kendra and Dave.
Okay, thank you so much, Ashley, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We wanted to give this webinar today because we know many school districts are particularly looking at updating ventilation systems, and every district, no matter what's going on, usually has a fair amount of capital upgrades that need to be made. And the challenge is always, how are we going to fund them? And so you might be surprised to know that there are some various different ways, including energy savings, that can be used as a funding source. And so we're going to tell you about how that works today. Again, my name is Kendra McQuilton. I'm the owner of ECG. It's my family business, been with ECG for about 20 years now. And I have been involved with over 125 projects, large capital projects that have been funded completely out of guaranteed energy savings. Dave, would you like to introduce yourself really quickly?
Hi, I'm Dave Newman. I'm the VP of Engineering for ECG. I have over 20 years experience in the energy performance contracting design world. I'm principally responsible for the development, design, construction, and measurement and verification of all of our projects for the ECG group. I oversee that entire process.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so today we'll just kind of go through the current situation with capital projects that we see. We only work with K through 12 school districts, so we're very familiar with what various districts are experiencing. Kind of go through the different types of consultants that are involved with capital upgrades, and then go through the different funding options that you have and which teams of experts can best serve you during them. And finally, we will go over some next steps if you might be interested in pursuing an energy savings-based project. So the Government Accountability Office recently came out with a report that stated that 54% of our nation's school buildings have poor ventilation. And I'm sure if you're on this call today, chances are you're one of them. It's just an endemic issue with school districts, and with COVID, everybody is looking for ways to improve ventilation across the board. You pair that with the fact that the average school building in New York is about 60 years old, which accounts for some of that poor ventilation. And so you've got a situation here where districts really have some critical needs on their hands, and they're going to continue to deteriorate, right? With every passing year, there's going to be additional needs that continue to pile up. And it may be very convenient to kind of put those needs on the back burner. Again, of course, with everything going on with COVID and getting kids back to school, and that's completely understandable. It is important to realize, though, that also has a consequence, right? There's a consequence to doing things and a consequence to not doing things. And if important upgrades are put off year after year, you could be faced with a couple of unpleasant circumstances. You might have an emergency project, which has anyone ever had a boiler unexpectedly stop functioning in the middle of winter? That's not something that any district wants to experience. You're going to pay through the nose to get that fixed, as well as it's embarrassing publicly. You will have larger future bonds potentially, which will be harder theoretically to sell to your community. It'll be a bigger imposition of a tax increase to your community. You will have higher energy and operating costs. The less efficient your systems are, they continue to degrade over time. And then uncomfortable learning and working environments. And, again, a lot of it goes back to HVAC systems and how important they are to the comfort of buildings and how they really, need to be addressed properly now more than ever. So there are several options for funding upgrades. And I'm sure you're familiar with all of these, especially the first three. But we wanted to share with you an innovative funding mechanism that not every district is aware of. And it goes by the name of an energy performance contract. But really, I like to refer to it as a funding option because that's exactly what it is. And yes, we're generating energy savings, but the cost of the project is going to be paid by those savings. So really, it's just like a regular capital project in the sense that we're doing the same types of upgrades, but the funding source is different. Instead of going out to your community and asking them to support a bond or having to dip into your budget or capital reserve, the energy savings themselves are the funding source for certain capital projects. Now, there are several different unique aspects to energy savings funded projects, energy performance contracts. And it's important to know the difference because sometimes what we see is districts thinking, okay, I'm just going to handle this energy performance contract the same way I do a normal project. And that's when districts tend to get into trouble because there are a lot of unique aspects here. It's important to have the right eyes on these projects and the right team of experts guiding you through. But there are some real benefits that we want to share with you. First of all, school administrators like yourselves, you won't have to manage multiple contractors. It's a turnkey project that requires hiring one large company like Johnson Controls or Honeywell or Siemens or others to come in and do the upgrades turnkey. It does not need to be voter approved. So right there, that's takes any risk of that off the table. Does not require a tax increase or any out-of-pocket costs or change orders. So our customers really like those aspects of it. And all of those are items that would come into play, of course, with a bond. Other items that would come into a play with a bond is that you would not necessarily get guaranteed energy savings in a bond, but you do get that in an energy performance contract. Energy performance contracts also maximize the utility rebates, and the rebates are guaranteed by the contractor in an energy savings funded project. So again, those are assurances that, or, they're not necessarily optimized in a bond. And you get full discretion over the contractors and equipment that goes into an energy savings project. It's not like a bond where there's low bidders that you may not be thrilled with, but they were the low bidder, so you have to move forward with them legally. Or if they put in a different brand of equipment that you didn't necessarily want, but it satisfies the or equal clause, you have to go with that. There's none of those restrictions in an energy project. Okay, we're going to get a bit into the financial differences for the next couple of slides about, how energy projects are financed, the out-of-pocket costs in each type of project. So I'm going to turn it over to Dave to take you guys through these next couple.
Great. Thank you, Kendra. So this slide is really just kind of an overview of the comparison of the out-of-pocket costs of doing your traditional bond capital type project versus an energy performance contract and energy savings, using energy savings to drive a project. We're just giving an example of a $10 million project. And really the point of this slide here, and the key thing is to kind of demonstrate the out-of-pocket upfront costs that the district have to outlay in which to develop a bond versus a turnkey energy savings project where everything is self-funded and absorbed by the project development team. So, either way, you need an architect, but for the bond, you need to develop drawings before you put out your bids. And for permitting, with an energy project, those are developed as part of the development process, and the energy performance contractor will absorb those costs in development. Construction manager, typically project management and construction management is a turnkey part of the energy project. It's not a third party that you have to retain like you typically do in a bond to try to manage and oversee all the various elements and contractors of a bond. Same thing with miscellaneous expenses like the bond counsel. Those can be covered by the energy savings and absorbed into the base project so that you're not outlaying those costs to develop this project. Other items which can be many thousands of dollars in administrative burden and expense is the fact that Wick's law does not apply to an energy project. You have one turnkey contractor that executes the entire project, and all subcontractors work under them, as opposed to typical bond work where under Wick's laws you need to have your multiple prime contractors and you need to manage all of those contractors and the coordination of them. Certainly all the change orders are disallowed in energy performance contracts and energy projects. So you don't have all that administrative overhead and headache of being able to administer, review, and approve or disapprove change orders. And just in general, there's a significant amount of administrators' time to manage this whole entire bond process and all the changes and costs and paperwork that go along with it. Under an energy project, it is entirely turnkey and included within the project. So you don't have to outlay expense or really your time to manage all of this. It's all turnkey to the project. So really, when we sum that all up, for a substantial bond project, you could easily have, as high as $800,000 of out-of-pocket cost, things that have to be paid and funded upfront or during the development and construction of the bond. Whereas in the energy savings project, all of that gets fully absorbed upfront by the contractor developing the project and paid out of energy savings really in arrears so that you don't have that upfront capital outlay. Okay. Also, I mentioned management of bonds versus energy savings projects. And again, like I mentioned, you need to manage or oversee the development of the plan specs, the scopes with your architect and engineer. You have to manage and retain the construction management. And again, you've got under Wix, you've got multiple prime contractors with separate contracts, separate project management, foreman, schedules, and all of this that has to now be coordinated and managed to successfully execute bond work. In the case of an energy project, you've got energy engineers in-house that are fully developing these projects in coordination and with the architects and engineers in concert. We work collaboratively and together, and really something that you don't have to manage. It's something that really manages itself. And all of the construction and all of the calculations and all of the savings are all developed and handled turnkey by the energy performance contractor. You don't have that burden at all to develop this project. Okay. So just a comparison here, traditional architects on a bond project versus energy engineers and energy experts in developing these types of energy projects. like we said, the architects charge fees directly to the school district. It really is an out-of-pocket cost, and something that it can be variable depending on how the bond gets developed and how many changes occur through that development process. It can increase cost. Um, Under the energy project with energy engineers, there are no fees. They are fully absorbed by the project, turnkey. Architects are very good at architectural design. They're very good at what they do when it comes to architecture and bonding. But when we're talking about an energy project, you really need experts in their principally engineering projects, their lighting and temperature controls, HVAC equipment, boilers. So while there are architectural elements in energy projects, they are typically very, very focused on engineering. And because they're a guaranteed energy project, they inherently require experts in energy analysis, experts in energy engineering, and experts that understand high efficiency equipment and how to evaluate those types of returns on investment. The other thing to point out is that energy performance contracts in New York State Ed have very, very specific and frankly opaque rules. There are a lot of elements that are above and beyond a typical bond code review. The SED does specifically review the energy audit, the energy savings claims, and there is a raft of unique requirements for energy projects that if you don't have strong experience with SED and the SED mechanical reviewers, you can end up with a project that really falls apart during the code review process because you didn't follow all their unique guidelines and rules to stay within the statutory compliance or the specific Article 9 law guidelines, as well as others that they will routinely hit us with that are sort of unwritten rules, but things that the reviewers expect. And having developed these projects, well over 100 of these projects for the state ed department, we have a very, very clear understanding of their expectations and the nuances to avoid hitting, what can be major roadblocks in the code review process with state ed. Okay. Last thing is just that, typically in a bond, you're using municipal bonds and bands to fund a project. Typically on an energy project, the energy performance contractor is really turnkey developing and funding all the upfront costs of that. And you really have tremendous flexibility on how you actually fund those projects. Most of them, they use a tax-exempt municipal lease, which does not require the voter approval and allows extreme flexibility on the repayment schedules so that we can really align the payment schedules to the energy savings so that you're always paying your debt in arrears, which is how we construct these projects to guarantee the no out-of-pocket cost, where on a bond, just by nature of how you have to fund it, you simply can't facilitate that self-funding type aspect. It is something that's very unique to energy performance contracts. Okay. So again, engineers, what are the other advantages and benefits you get with an energy performance contract and energy engineers? You get a free economic analysis. We're putting out, this is a professional service that goes out by a request for proposal. It's not a low bid. What you get at no cost is very detailed, comprehensive audits of your building that you get at no cost and no obligation. Even if you did nothing after you did the RFP, you're still left with a huge, book of detailed information about your buildings and your needs. Okay. The energy reduction is an extreme focus of this project. The goal is to drive as much savings as we can, to fund as much work as we can, and for self-funding. We typically, really no project we do really falls below that 30% reduction. That's a very typical, and sometimes it goes quite a bit higher than that. When a really focused audit on energy systems is done here. All right. And in addition to that, it really provides a great framework, and really, if nothing else, you get tremendous amount of information, and you get a real timeline of how, a real overview of what your needs in your building and how you can address a lot of those critical needs. All right. In addition to that, we stay in the ESCO. There's a measurement and verification process that goes on with an energy project, and at minimum, we stay with the project for a full 3 years, guaranteeing that the energy savings as projected were born out of the project and are actually being delivered, or ensuring that if the ESCO does fall short, we're there to ensure that you are being cut a check and made whole, so that if they do fall short, you are still compensated and you still get your revenue that was promised to you. You get your savings no matter what in these types of projects. Okay. So again, just another financial comparison here, the bond versus the energy savings. We're just really doing just a simple $10 million project, assuming a 40% building aid, a 2% interest rate on the borrowing, the building aid that is eligible on either project, energy savings, you have your taxpayer contribution, your home share on a bond, and your net cash after the project term. So really what we're trying to show here is that on your energy project, your energy savings are not guaranteed and they're not quantified. And energy is not a focus of the development of a bond project. Certainly you will obtain some energy savings by virtue of doing energy related systems, but it's not a focus and a driver of the project. With an energy savings project, it is the driver. It's the principal driver, is to get critical capital that you need, but to also have an extreme focus on the energy. And on top of that, it comes with a monetary guarantee. So the ESCO is on the hook to make sure that not only are they driving the most savings to drive the largest project, but they've got to put their money where their mouth is. They've got to guarantee that those savings get delivered and that systems are commissioned extremely well, and they will continue to monitor those systems after they're installed, because it's their money on the line. It's their guarantee. They have to help you make sure that they meet that performance. Taxpayer contribution is exactly the same thing. We're doing an energy project and we're using the energy. In an energy project, the energy savings has to cover the base project to make it cash neutral. In addition, that you have the eligibility of the state aid. In the case of an energy project, the state does not allow us to use the aid to buy down the project. You can only use it to pay the interest on the loan. Any additional state aid that is paid to the district has to go to the district as cash. So in the difference of a bond, where you're going to directly use that state aid to attempt to buy down the base cost, and then the additional cost comes out of pocket. In this case, the state specifically says, no, the energy must cover the base cost. And then the state aid comes out as the additional state aid, once all costs are covered, comes out as a cash flow. So that's typically, like we're saying in this example, you'll get a cash flow over the term of the project, that can be as high as $3 million that just goes into your general fund and is coming out specifically because the state wants the project structured that way. You don't get that advantage with a bond. All right.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
No problem.
If there are any questions, I know we just ripped through a lot there financially, but the bottom line is that it's really important to know that you can use energy savings and you can use it to fund needed capital to varying degrees, depending on how old your systems are. For example, if you have not converted to district-wide LED lighting at this point, you're literally sitting on a gold mine of funding. Because if we were to change that lighting out, we'll save 50% off of whatever your current electric bill is through an energy performance contract. And if we do that, we can then use the savings to pay for the boiler that you need. We bundled measures together that are energy related. And, it allows you to reduce your needs on your building condition survey. It allows you to reduce a bond that you might be planning and show the community, look, we're not just looking at bond after bond, we're looking at innovative funding sources for your benefit. So not everything has to result in a tax increase. So it's really an important tool for school districts right now, in order to be sensitive to their communities as well as get the work done that they know they need to do. So again, in summary, I think it's very important also to know that energy projects really need to be managed by energy engineers. It makes sense, right? The entire financial foundation of an energy savings-based funding source or project is energy calculations. How much is the district going to save if it replaces this piece of equipment with that? Who's going to run those calculations? Who's going to vet those calculations, make sure they're appropriate, make sure they're not over exaggerated, make sure the district is truly protected. You need to have someone who knows how to review energy calculations and understands the unique systems involved with generating energy savings. So that really requires energy engineers. So we're uniquely expert in evaluating these types of project scopes and their resultant savings, again, which is the foundation of your financing. Energy engineers also understand through their unique focus on performance contracts how to reduce your energy costs by 30%, which is the average that we see when we do energy performance contracts. We plan, measure, and manage the energy project. Again, it's all about the right set of eyes on your project. So we're going to make sure that everything that goes on in the project is in your best interests, and that, the contractors understand that the district has their own set of expertise on that side of the table. And we really look at ourselves as a safety net for the school district for all of these reasons. Energy performance contracts, if a school administrator has done one in their career, it's a lot oftentimes. And so you shouldn't be required to or think that you need to suddenly become an expert overnight. And if you do feel that way, don't feel you need to avoid the projects just because they're foreign to you, or you don't have a background in it, or you've never run one of these before and you're afraid, rightfully so. It's a new thing that a lot of people don't have experience with on the school district side. Just know that there is help available that will be your protector, that will be your safety net to make sure that the project runs as it should, the numbers are correct, the savings guarantees, the contract, everything is reasonable and to your benefit. And again, the other major difference is, in a program, in a model like this, we're not charging you fees. So all of that, all of the funding comes through the energy savings and the contractor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kendra and Dave. We did get some questions that came in through the private chat, and just want to let everyone know we're still taking questions. So if you have any, you can submit them on the side and we'll answer them live. But one of the questions that came in, can an EPC be implemented quicker than a traditional bond? Kendra, you're on mute, by the way. Dave, would you like to answer that question?
Lost my cursor. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, in a word, yes, it can. Matter of fact, they can be implemented extremely quickly because of the turnkey nature of it, and because you have one contractor that's really responsible for the entire turnkey process. It makes it a very smooth process, and a much faster process than a bond process.
Great, thank you. And the same follow-up to that question was, can an energy performance and a bond project be done in parallel?
In a word again, yes. And not only yes, but I would say this year alone, we have several that are in process that we are coordinating quite successfully with bonds. Matter of fact,
Mhm.
in many cases, what a lot of districts have chosen to do is they've actually, in order to maximize their bonds, is that they've carved out a lot of the energy related components of the bond. So, like the energy project, do the boiler and the air handling unit and the lighting and the things that are energy driven, and then allow that those funds in the bond to then be reallocated to non-energy things like paving parking lots, windows, or other very heavy capital type work that don't drive energy. So yes, it's very common, and as I said, it's often used to actually optimize or maximize a bond.
Perfect, thank you. Another one that came in through the private chat was, how do we know the savings are guaranteed?
Okay.
Dave.
So that's part of our one of our biggest roles
Mhm.
in managing these energy projects is making sure that the contractual terms and the calculations and the contractual terms are strong, clearly delineated. There is a standard international protocol called IPMVP, which kind of governs how energy savings has to be measured in a project like this. But with our extensive experience with these projects, we understand how to make sure the contracts are written so that the get out of jail free card clauses and other elements that can give the ESCO an escape route not to be fully responsible for the energy savings are not in there. So it's a very big part of what we do is making sure that the contract is very tight with regard to the guarantee and that you're
Great,
protected.
thank you. And then I also see we have one in the public chat. What are the most cost-effective projects? Which I'm going to assume Dave again as the engineer.
So I assume by cost effective projects, you mean which are the ones that have the best return on investment and really drive the projects. And
Yes.
really principally in all energy projects, the quick payback no brainer ones are your lighting, upgrading to LED lighting throughout the district. Temperature control systems are typically big drivers on the project. Making sure your buildings are not running at 75 degrees at 3 in the morning when no one is there, bringing in heating up all this fresh air when there's no one in the building, that needs to have a 75-degree classroom. So really those are probably the two biggest drivers. However, there's a raft of other measures that come into these projects, managing the computers in the buildings and making sure the computers aren't running at overnight and off hours. And then just really the whole idea of these projects is that those saving measures are there to help drive other measures that you need that are energy related, like your boilers and your air handlers and your rooftop units and things like that. Okay.
Great, thank you. I'll just give it another second for any more questions that come in, and then I think we can wrap it up. Second. Okay. All right, well, you have our contact information on here if you want to do a no cost energy savings assessment. And we truly hope that you leave here prepared with the knowledge you need to embark on your own EPC and bring these benefits over to your district. So at the end of this, we do ask that if you could please take a few moments to fill out a brief survey. It's just going to help us better serve you in the future in regards to different webinar topics and the content that we brought to you today. And Kendra, Dave, any closing words?
No, just thank you so much for your time today. And if we can do anything to help you with your current situation at your school district, look into this, help you explore this as a funding option, we're happy to do so. Please contact us.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe and have a great day.
Thank you.